Welcome to the Outer Realm with Michelle DeRoche and Amelia Pisano. Airing live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Thursday edition of the Outer Realm, doing things a bit differently today. This is a pre-recorded show. Yes, you heard right, pre-recorded show. And you know what that means? That means we actually have a guest from overseas, from beautiful Ireland. Doesn't that work out nicely considering St. Patrick's Day is just around the corner? I thought so. Anyway, we are broadcasting live just on UFO Paranormal YouTube at the moment because this is going to be airing tonight on all of our 8 platforms. So welcome. If you happen to catch it this afternoon, good for you. Otherwise, you can catch Amelia and I in chat tonight, and we'll all have a good time. So we are, of course, on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM from the beautiful city of New Orleans. We are fully sponsored by the amazing people over at Folgers Coffee who have been with us since day one. So we are so grateful for them. And a big thank you to Dr. Snick, aka the Sonic Surgeon, Justin Snicker, for his contribution of our intro and outro. For those of you that want to catch him, just look for any good music, Bandcamp, Spotify, iTunes, Amazon. You will certainly find his music, which is, of course, compromise of Halloween, horror, sci-fi, and dark wave electronic music, which is just awesome. It is amazing stuff. Tonight, we are going to be welcoming for the very first time Dr. Mary Helen Hensley. She's going to be discussing her near-death experience after a car accident, along with reconnecting to her life's purpose and, of course, her journey to healing. It sounds like a really fascinating story, so I'm sure it's going to just completely hold all of our interest. Catch us, of course, on UFO Paranormal YouTube this evening. We're also going to be on International Public Radio YouTube. We're going to be on all of our usual Facebook pages, which will be, of course, The Outer Realm, Canada's Most Haunted, UFO Paranormal, United Public Radio, News on the Flip Side, Joe Montaldo, UFO Undercover. There'll be a whole array of them. The usual spots for our usual people. I'm sure you'll know how to get us. And of course, all chats will be open with Amelia and I, who, by the way, is still having internet issues. So she is going to be in chat for us today, interacting that way. So I'm hoping you guys will be able to tune in. Oh, and here we've got a little bit of a Luke, Josh. There you are. Fantastic. So we've got Amelia again, who's going to be participating in the show. So I think it's going to be a whole lot of fun. And I guess for some of our usual people who have memberships and who do subscribe, you will be seeing the show actually live right now, and the replay will be this evening. So Dr. Mary Helen Hensley was involved in a car accident that was about to change her life forever, and with very vivid clarity, she was able to recount all that took place during her near-death experience, along with reconnecting to her life's purpose and healing. She has facilitated the healing process for countless individuals and is one of Ireland and Europe's most sought-after metaphysical healers. She's the author, I guess, several books from what I'm seeing here. Let me just see if I can chime them off since we do have time. We've got Understanding Is the New Healing, Bringing Death to Life, the Promised Trilogy, Promised by Heaven. Sounds like a fascinating. You can find her on maryhelenhensley.com. She also has a Twitter account, so very accessible. She has a Bachelor of Arts in Communications and Graphic Design. She went to receive a doctorate in chiropractic in America, practiced in Ireland from 1999 until 2012. So I apologize. I'm reading this. Usually Amelia does this. So following her near-death experience in 1991, she began to realize that her previous skills and communication or communicating with those spirits had become so much more. So a series of incredible serendipitous events led her to develop her newfound ability to facilitate the healing process. Let's see, healing with sound, vibration, and frequency. So she says, with wisdom, wit, wisdom, and wow are synonymous with her. Her marriage of no holds barred humor and honesty, coupled with integrity and compassion, make her one of Ireland and Europe's most sought after metaphysical healers and synergistic speakers. After receiving a BA in communications and graphic design from Coker University in Hartsville, South Carolina, Mary Helen was involved in a high-speed collision in Charleston, which resulted in near-death experience, riddled with injuries, including a broken neck. My goodness, she went on to earn her doctorate of chiropractic. The list just goes on. She's the author of 9 books, including Promised by Heaven, co-authored of the number best-selling Bringing Death to Life and Understanding is the New Healing. I think this is going to be fantastic. Amelia, don't even worry about it. I'm okay. I'm making this work. It's hard because I'm sort of juggling around, but it's fantastic. So I'm glad you can at least participate with me in the show. And hi, Josh. So let me see here. We are just going to wait for her to pop on in, and that should be any time now, and we'll get the show on the road. So she sounds really delightful, and I think those who are really interested in near-death experiences, we seem to have a lot of listeners who are interested in near-death experiences. So I know so many people have written in and, through the last couple of years wanting to know more. It's so different for everyone. I mean, Amelia's had them, and I'm sure she would tell you about it if she was on, and she'll have a list of questions. Yeah, I can't wait to hear about her experiences on. There we go. Now I feel like I'm just talking to you. Can't wait to hear about her experiences and thoughts on NDE. No, for sure. Hi, Cece. For sure. It's definitely something that is different for everyone. Like Wayne, I still can't get over Wayne's experience, of being on a boat and, all these people on with him and the person just, rowing away on this big boat, everybody being silent. It's just weird, some of the things that people experience. For me, it's just like, good grief. I don't know. I know I had one when I was about 9 or 10. And for me, it was just very, very vague. There isn't a lot of recollection. And here we are. Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm really doing well. Thank you. Amelia sends her apologies. She's got internet issues, so she's going to be in chat. So don't be surprised if the odd question comes up. I'll put it on the screen and she'll be asking from there. So she's feeling a little bit annoyed at the cable people right now. So
listen, it's an ongoing event here where it may or may not work on any given day.
Oh.
Yeah, Ireland is doing all that, rolling out the 5G stuff, and it's
yes. It's like that here too. It's just a lot of systems aren't compatible with 5G. So Amelia says hello. There we go. So how was your day? I mean, I guess it's an evening for you. You're about 8 p.m. right now.
It's 8 p.m. Yeah, just finished work.
Wow. Well, thank you. I totally snoozed on the record thing. I was like, oh, that's right. We do have to pre-record this. We do have some guests from the UK. They're like, oh no, we'll stay up and do it live. I'm like, you guys are champions because.
And I usually would, but I have work in the morning, so going to bed at 4 o'clock would have been a little
Yeah, no, it would have
a
been
bit
difficult.
much.
I can completely appreciate that. Absolutely. So, why don't you, I guess I like to start off, with humble beginnings, and then just, bring, I always say this show is always about the guest. So I want you to go in any direction that you would like to take this. The live show, I mean, we end up with like between 2 and 3 million listeners. So I really want to make sure that you get everything you want out so everybody hears that.
Nice. Yeah.
Okay. So the stage is yours, madam.
Oh gosh. Okay. So just anything about me.
Yeah, humble beginnings. I mean, you are you
Well,
you
funny enough, my beginnings are a little odd.
oh, we
So
like
that's a
odd.
fun place to start. When my mother was pregnant with me, and so she would have been pregnant in 1968. I was born in 1969, and I was the fourth, the youngest child, and she ended up having the German measles in the first trimester of pregnancy. So they got called in, she and my father, and basically back then they were like, this is not good. You can go ahead and expect this, and, sent them home basically to prepare for, if I survived it, a child with special or additional needs or whatever. So my father was a minister. And he was an interesting minister because although we come from the South and we come from the Bible Belt region, he wasn't a kind of a holy roller. He was a sporty roller. Because he was a football coach and a big American football player. And,
right.
So everybody loved his sermons because they always had to do with sports. Right. And he was a real big joker and all that. So, but he was very devout. Right. And he went home and, of course, he was praying about this and he was asking for guidance and all. Well, he had a little visit. And the funniest thing is you would think for a Southern Baptist minister to get a little visit, it's going to be an angelic being. It's going to be whatever.
Yeah.
And he couldn't call it that. He always referred to it as a celestial visit.
Wow.
Because these angels, if they were angels, had no wings and they were humanoid type beings. So, you and I would be like, oh, okay, we know what that is.
Right. Right.
And it was very, very real. Well, what was interesting was that these two beings told my father that not only would his daughter be okay. Remember, this is 1968.
You don't talk about stuff like that in 1968.
Yeah, well, there was no ultrasound. Yeah,
right.
So that not only would his daughter be okay, but that she was going to have some unusual abilities coming into it, and that he and my mother would really have to take care and help her through that as best they could.
Wow.
So lo and behold, I'm born, and barred my odd sense of humor, everything was intact. Right. And so this was kind of how it all began. So you can imagine my parents are always kind of waiting for the shoe to drop. It's like, okay, the two celestial dudes are like, something interesting is going to happen. She's going to have unique abilities. What is this? Is she going to be like levitating, floating around the room? What's happening here? So, my first recollection of us discussing this is what I call the kitchen table talk. And that's how I've always referred to it in my mind, because I was about 4 and right. My father, again, that big booming sports figure, he was a world champion weightlifter at 69. So that gives you kind
good
of
for
him.
Picture,
so he was a man of God and he was a man of steel.
Right.
But he had this big booming Southern voice,
right.
And he could just stop people dead in their tracks. And I remember him bringing me in and sitting me down at the kitchen table. And he said, "Sugar, do you know the difference between alive and dead?"
Oh, wow.
An interesting question to ask a 4-year-old.
Right.
And it was so funny because I'm like, I had no idea what he was talking about. Well, what had been happening is I would come in, and my best friend in the world at that stage of my life was my mother's father. We called him Judge. He was right. Dr. Garland Clark. He was a surgeon from Kentucky. He actually did a lot of work with Edgar Casey. And
Nice.
he was a real interesting character. My grandfather met Casey when he was 15,
Wow.
and because he had some unusual abilities as well.
He
And so
sure
he went
did.
and sought Casey out. No, this was my grandfather goes and hears about Casey, goes to
Wow.
Lexington, Kentucky, and goes, "What's happening to me?" And that's when they first met. And
Wow.
so years later, when Judge went on to become a surgeon and Casey had the ARE in Virginia Beach, they used to consult.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was
Wow. What a
really,
great
really interesting
story.
tie
What a
there. But he was my very best friend in the world. And so my interest in, becoming a doctor and doing everything is because of him. And he used to take me on just the most excellent trips and adventures, and just a really neat guy. And he always spoke to me like I was not a grown up in a way where it was like talking over my head, but he always spoke to me as an equal, if you get me.
yes.
And he was sharing with me, showing me things, and telling me these strange things that I could do or would be able to do, how I was to use them. And the bottom line was always kind of, look, we're in service here. You're a steward of humanity. I'm a steward of humanity. This is why we can do what we do. And that was it. That was kind of his role in my life. And so I'd bounce in and, I'd talk to my parents about what Judge and I had been talking about, blah, blah, blah. And so that's when this conversation happens this day. And my father declares that my grandfather Judge had been dead since I was 1. So this was the
Wow.
first time that I can recollect. I'm 53 now.
Right.
So this is the first memory I have of realizing that I was different. And it was because somebody else deemed me different. Do you know what I mean? Like, I didn't
Right.
feel different. That was my normal.
Right.
And so when people are like, "Oh my God, what was that like?" Well, I'm like, "Okay, I see you. There's Michelle. I can see your fabulous hair. I can see that
Thank you.
amazing background." And I'm
Right.
going, "You and I are having a real time conversation.
Yes.
This is real to me." Do you know?
Right.
Now,
Yes.
is it the same as the patients that I just saw 30 minutes ago where I had my hands on their flesh and blood? No. Do you know? But which one is more real than the other?
No, it's
On who
true.
you're asking.
To you, it's the
So
same.
when
Yeah.
I'm talking to my grandfather Judge and he looks like a fully formed, multi-dimensional hologram of an individual, I'm just going, "Oh, okay." And it looks no different than the way that you and I are communicating right now.
Right.
So it's not like he was sitting flesh and blood on my bed, but he was sitting there in an image that looks very like the one you and I are looking at right
Like
now.
very three-dimensional.
Very,
Yes. Yes.
So it was really interesting. And that was kind of how it all really began. So
Right.
once that old shoe had dropped, my parents were like, "Okay, something's up here." And then it was like the floodgates opened, because that's when I started getting the dreams. And so as a child, I would dream things, and they would happen. And I had this really peculiar, a peculiar interaction with death.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't bothered by it as a child. I wanted to, strange as it may sound, now I loved my friends and I loved playing like any other kid does, but I also really enjoyed spending time in the nursing home at a really early age. I loved the elderly people. And
Aw.
what I actually really loved was what I could see around them, because a lot of them were getting ready to go through their transition. And it was beautiful. It was like fireworks. And so imagine for a child who is already fully aware that it's not like a dimmer switch is on and this, the soul is dimming out and fading out and now it dies. It was exactly the opposite. You've got this fireworks celebration going on as the energy is revving up and this soul is getting ready to discard the cocoon.
Right.
And so I loved watching this process and I liked being around it when it was transitioning. And so I used to spend a lot of time in the nursing home as a child. And my parents would take me. And also because my father was a minister, we were forever in the hospital every Sunday afternoon after church and after lunch, in the hospital we went. I loved it. Because I liked seeing what was going on around there that now I realize other people weren't seeing.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
because when you're close to death, there's so many people that come around you to prepare you. So you're not freaked out when when you actually pass, like you're used to seeing them there with you for a little while. So you're not afraid to go with them.
Right.
Right. So
Mhm.
I guess as a youngster, though, that's quite a hobby.
Yeah, totally. It was awesome.
Yeah.
And then what was a really funny part of it was because my dad was a minister, he was also writing the eulogies. So when people passed away, and it
Yes.
didn't come from a very large town. It was a close knit town,
Yes.
and so Dad he did a lot of funerals, as many weddings as funerals, and we got into this funny little thing that you couldn't really talk to anybody about. But if somebody had passed, let's say, and my father hadn't been there to discuss with them what they wanted said about them in their eulogy or whatever, they'd just come to me. And
Right.
so I could be eating my cornflakes, and next thing, Mr. Smith is standing next to me, and he is making himself apparent to my father through me in a way that no one else could know. He might have known my dad in high school or in elementary school, and might
Right.
have known things that only they would know together.
Yeah.
And so I would say, "Oh, Dad, Mr. Smith is here. Well, how do you know it's him?" And I'm like, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, "All right." And he'd get out the pad and he would start writing. And together they would write their eulogies. I mean, it was really wild when you think about
That's
it.
fascinating
I
to
know, it's
me.
kind of
So
cool,
the
isn't it?
spirit is basically, I shouldn't say it is, the spirit individual is basically saying, this is what I would like to see mentioned.
Yeah. This is how I want to be remembered. And funny enough, it could have been like the president of a bank, and it was someone who had been a pillar of society. And that was never the stuff they wanted to talk about.
No.
They wanted to talk about playing together as kids on the gravel football field on Brown Street. There were, the interactions of how important those friendships were. And like, they never wanted to talk about what they had achieved in their lives or the money they made or the accolades or anything. They never, ever wanted to talk about that.
Mhm.
And the idea that they would come back so that people, if they had been, very affluent or successful, in their lives in the terms of monetary wealth, it was like, don't remember me for that.
Right. Right.
And
No.
that was really interesting. And I can actually remember this character of a man, and he died in his 90s. This guy was hilarious, and he was a very good family friend, and he had a great sense of humor, and he used to drive a hearse. That was his car.
Yeah, we had one. We had
I
one
love
here
this
too.
guy, right?
It's true. Yeah, all the
And so
elderly
he would
people
just,
at the church would come to churches. I hate that thing. I'll be in one soon enough. It's like, but why does he always park it on the street?
oh man,
So
exactly.
they're
Yeah.
cool.
So
They're
he
cool.
go in with the hearse. Oh, the guy was so funny. But we were at this particular funeral, and I can distinctly remember having helped my dad with this particular eulogy because Dad hadn't been able to make it, and there was a big group of them who had grown up together, and it was always strange watching my father bury his lifelong friends, but I just remember, and like, the place was just in hysterics because the eulogy was brilliant.
Right.
And I remember this elderly guy, the one who drove the hearse, coming up to my dad at the end of the funeral and going, "Hey, Dick, when I die," and he said, "Bud, how do you know I'm not going to go before you?" And he said, "Dick, when I die,
Mhm.
I'm going to come back to and say something to you." And next
It's like,
thing, he
what?
whispers into my father's ear, and I'll never forget it. And it was quite some time later that he was like, I think I already lived in Ireland. I had
Wow.
just moved here when this guy, and he was old then. And I had this visit from this guy, and I went, "Oh, he's gone." This was typical for me. I would get my mom would always call me with the news, and I'm like, "I already know." And she's like, "Stop doing that."
You're just taking it all away from
Yeah,
me.
yeah. And
Right.
and so I called my parents, and I said, "Just by chance, is he gone?" And they said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, Daddy's already been to visit." And he goes, "How do you know? How do you know it was him?" I said, "Because he said he left you a message." And he said, "He did." And I said, "Yeah, do you remember in the church?" He goes, "Oh, do I remember? Absolutely." And I said, "He told you something very specific?" And Dad said, "Yeah." And he said, tell Dick I'm playing Cowboys and Indians.
Oh.
That was their favorite thing when they were little.
Aw.
And
Yeah.
he said, tell Dick, and that was Dad was like, there he is. And it was instant confirmation. And even for people who subscribe to an organized religion, you know, it's
Yeah.
really nice to have some confirmation, because we're all coming in from different angles and different approaches and all. And it doesn't matter like what box they're in, because
Right.
ultimately we're all going back into that same space. So it's really lovely to have that kind of confirmation. So my
Yeah.
childhood was kind of full of that.
I think it's
And
great because I mean, usually the Baptist religion or the faith is very staunch, you
yeah,
know.
we weren't
Now,
really we didn't follow that book.
no, I know, but that's what I love about it. It's just like you had so much support, right down to your father saying, "Okay, here he is. Okay, what does he want me to write?" That's like really almost unheard of when you're dealing with a Baptist minister. I'm going to put up a comment. Funny because we have a couple of our regulars that have come in. I guess they found the show because it says, "Okay, what happens when you're stuck in this world? Do you not have people show up when you're dying? I'm very confused." Well, there's a lot of reason people stay behind. I'll let you take this one.
Do you not have people show up? Sure, you know, I've been dead, and you know, so we're getting to that part of the story. So
Yeah,
basically,
well,
skipping
absolutely.
ahead,
Yeah, we'll cover
I
that.
was in a very serious car accident in 1991. I broke my neck and I died, so it was clinically dead. So you know, I can speak with some authority on that subject in my own experience. Now, different people have had different experiences, and that's the beauty of it, is that we all have different experiences.
Yes.
But what's so interesting is having grown up in that background,
Mm-hmm.
you know, at that stage for 21 years, when I actually was confronted with my own death, it was absolutely nothing like what I had been taught. Not by my
Wow.
parents anyway. Taught by my dead grandfather, yes.
Right.
That was, you know, that was amazing. It's like the organized religion makes it so small. It's not that it's
It-
wrong, it's just tiny. It's
yes.
like, you know, it's like trying
Yes.
to, if you had a child's, a child age 5 pair of shorts, and at 35 you were trying to pull those shorts on and make them fit no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what it's like. You know, the organized religion is a box within a lot of people are finding themselves and able to work through things and then graduate onto the next level of understanding, and that's what it's there for. So in the actual death process for me, it was nothing like that, you know. So I'm like thinking, oh, there's Jesus, you know, Jesus is going to be there and pearly gates and all. Nah, it was none of that, you know. And like my dead grandfather had been coming my whole life. So it's not like, you know, my dead were there waiting for me. It was a
Right.
very personal experience. And so those who were waiting for me were actually my guides.
Right.
So yeah, surprise. We all have guides. And who knew? Because I certainly didn't learn that in Sunday school.
Right.
And
Right.
it was very, very different, the experience of going through the death process, because I was completely in control.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, fast forward, let's blow through growing up, and you
Yeah.
know, my parents are very, very guarded about all of this crazy stuff that I'm able to do, so much to the point that my siblings didn't even know. So because my parents had no verbiage for it, they didn't come with a rule book or a, you know,
No,
set
that's
of
a boo
directions.
book. No,
They
it's
didn't
true.
know how to handle it, and I was every single day challenging, you know, not knowingly, but just by being, I was
Yes.
challenging what was inside their own box. And
Right.
so I was just in a different box. And
Right.
it was really interesting. So I started to become a little bit self-conscious about the fact, because, you know, you're going through your little grotty teenage years, and it's kind of like, you don't want to be different than everybody else. And you certainly don't want to be the freak who see, you know, I see dead people, because that wasn't
Exactly.
cool until much
No.
later. Right.
No. No.
And, you know, but that was me. And so like even my closest friends didn't know. And when I got to college, I was a cheerleader in college, and the closest that I ever came to serving humanity was I would write down the scores to the basketball games, and we'd put it in an envelope. I'd toss it in the drawer. We'd go cheer at the games, and we'd come back and everybody's cracking open the beers, and I'd be like, look, here's the score, you know. And that was the extent of me using my gifts to serve mankind. So what I had organized for myself on a soul level was that if I had reached the age of 21, and I, which is technically, as we as humans consider adulthood, if I had gotten to that space and I wasn't using these gifts in the most precious way,
Right.
that I had organized for this event to take place, and I had a choice. I could either leave and go off and do something else, or come back here, whatever, in a different form, or I could go through the death experience and come back into the same body and be completely changed. And that's what happened. So, I just celebrated my 30th rebirth day in December. And
Congratulations.
I just celebrated my 53rd birth to earth day 2 weeks ago. So
happy birthday.
I'm 50 and 33. Or,
Right.
and 50, or I'm 30 and 53.
Right.
So, which was really cool because I get to be a Sagittarius and a Pisces.
I know. I was going to say, I guess you can go with however you're feeling.
So, yes, at 53, I'm having my first Saturn return.
Right.
So, here's what happens is as you do in the South where I come from, if you're dating the same person, in your senior year of college, everybody's thinking you're going to get married, and your mom's picking out the silverware and the crystal patterns, and and so you end up moving to where that guy comes from. And so my boyfriend at the time was from Charleston, South Carolina, and so we graduated from college and we went to Charleston.
Right.
So I had graduated in the May of 1991, and in December of 1991, I was working for a sign company, and nothing glamorous either. I was mopping floors because, with my big fat college degree. But we were having our Christmas party, and I was on my way to this Christmas party, and I loved the work. I loved the people. That my bosses were amazing because they taught me so much about working in a business from the ground up, and they were deeply switched on as to how this world actually operates. So, when you look back and you see your angels unaware of the people who were placed in your life along the way to help guide. Well, Frank and Teresa were definitely top of that list.
Yes.
And so I'm on my way to that Christmas party, and I get to Highway 17 in Charleston, which is a major highway, this way. And I am here, and I'm going to have to pull across all of these lanes of traffic in order to turn towards town. So I'm waiting at my red light. And so when my light finally turns green, I made it across all the lanes of traffic, and I get to that last lane before I'm getting ready to turn left to go into my set of lanes.
Mm-hmm.
And I look over and I see this car barreling towards me. And in that moment, I went, "Oh, I'm getting ready to die." And it was just like that. There was no, "Oh my God, I'm so young."
Right. No,
don't do that. It was just like,
yeah.
It was just like, "Oh, okay, it's time for that now." And everything then just slowed down, and it started crawling. And this car is like barely moving towards me. And I'm looking at this and I'm going, "Oh, okay." And all of a sudden it's all very familiar, the process. And you're like, "Oh my gosh, you've done this loads of times." And, I certainly also didn't learn that in Sunday school.
Right.
Yeah. Cause I'm like, and it was a very, very familiar feeling. And I'm like, okay, well, all right, how do you want to handle this one? Yeah. And so my options at that stage were, do you want to stay inside the body? And do you want to feel the impact and then go, because you're going? Mm-hmm. Or do you want to get out of the body and watch the impact and then go? And I was like, that guy is going fast. And I don't really, because I was so suddenly comfortable with the situation, I couldn't perceive any added benefit to feeling that the impact and then going.
Yeah.
So I opted then, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, I can do this. I forgot." I opted to come up. So I actually witnessed my own death, which is really wild. So the body was crazy. In there hanging onto the wheel, and next thing I'm up and out. And this was really wild because at that moment, this was where my love of frequency began.
Right.
So everything I do, anybody who knows my work, now I'm all about frequency. I wrote the first book that has been turned into an audible book that's backed by healing frequencies. Like, this is everything I do.
Yes.
And the reason is because in that moment, when who I am left this body,
Hmm.
there was a sound. And the sound was a very low kind of a drone. I live in Ireland. I love traditional Irish music. And I always liken it to the sound of the bagpipes when the bag is filling with air before the pipes play. That's what it felt like. It was a low, really earthy tone. And it's funny because, we get into all this kind of new agey woo woo. And I'm like, I've got the weirdest stories you're ever going to hear. But I don't consider myself very woo-woo because I'm just like, this is normal to me. This is,
Right.
woo-woo is when you make it weird, and it's not weird because to me, that's just how this world works.
Right. Right.
So there is we get into this space of, it's like when I'm talking about the boxes, I'm actually a fan of boxes. It's the way Mother Earth works. You're in
Yes.
this box for a little while until you graduate this box, you move into this box. Boxes are necessary.
Right.
But, our new agey woo woo friends will make the box something. Well, I'm not in the box. They're so in the box. I'm an out of the box thinker, which
Right.
makes the box look like it's like unevolved or bad. When it's actually
Right.
there. That's like saying second grade. Second grade is so not necessary. You're in a progression of steps that are necessary to the growth and involvement of the solar spirit.
Right.
And so what was interesting about this sound is you've got this low droning vibe, and it's not because it's low vibration, but it is a lower frequency, and lower is not a bad word. Lower does not denote less evolved. It means that it has a lower pitch because its job is different than, let's say, something with a higher pitch.
Right.
So there's this low drone, and I'm going, oh, this is the sound that keeps me, who I really am, anchored into this body. Oh my God. Yeah. Remember, you're not that body.
Right.
And so as you're in this sound and you're looking down at yourself, and then everything speeds up and bam, I'm watching my car fold in half. It's spinning around. My head goes through the driver's side window. My neck breaks. And I'm watching this with this peculiar detached interest, all the while surrounded by that sound.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, wow, this is awesome. Because I'm looking back and I'm like, oh my God, there's Mim. Mim is a girl I went to college with. Charleston, South Carolina is a very large place. She
Right.
happened to be behind me, 2 cars behind.
Oh, wow.
And I got to
wow.
watch her see me dead in the vehicle and experience what someone who is attached to the earthly experience going, oh no, oh my God, I know her. And their panic ensues. And I'm just like sitting there with a box of popcorn, watching the whole thing unfold and going, oh my gosh, you're remembering the limitations of the emotional state of being a human being.
Right.
That doesn't mean that we're less evolved or that, but like, talk about taking on the greatest challenge ever. That's like going into a boxing ring with one hand tied behind your back.
Right.
We come here because we stuff this dynamic, omnipotent, amazing, incredibly glorious being. We stuff it into this little meat wagon.
True. Yes.
And we drive it around, and then we see how much we can do. Well,
this is our human experience, right? We're these exceptional beings on a human journey, having a human experience. And, we're sort of like that species with amnesia, and you don't remember it till, like you say, you're in the midst of it and you're like, oh yeah, this again.
But that's it. That's if you ask what you say when you're dead the most, what's happening the most. Oh, glorious God. Didn't know you're going like this all the time. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh shit.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Here we go. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what you're doing the whole time. It's super spiritual. You're like, oh man, how did I forget that? And I think it's interesting to note at that point, because when people are like, why would we do this to ourselves? If we're this fabulous, amazing, high vibe, amazing being that's coming in, why would we put ourselves into a place that's so dark and dirty and ugly? Because it's the only place in existence that I'm aware of where
Yes.
we have this beautiful and perfect dichotomy and duality that allows us to simultaneously experience joy and pain. It is very unique to the human experience, and it is such a gift because you can be in the most, you know, incredible state of bliss, happiness. You've just gotten the job of your dreams. Your daughter just had a baby. You know, you just met the love of your life. You can be euphoric with happiness.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
there are kids in a bomb shelter in the Ukraine. There's a global pandemic. There's all that goes with that facade. Do you know?
Yes.
And these things are happening at the same time. And so what happens is, this is where that phrase the desiderata, walk placidly amidst the noise.
Right.
Because that's what that means, because it is just noise. And when you can get somebody to understand that the euphoria and the destitution are all noise, and it's we as the human beings who denote whether this is good noise or bad noise, when it's just the noise.
Right.
And that the
Frequency.
joy of being a human, the experience, the growth, the evolution of being what we are, is being able to walk through that and not waver to one side or the other. Oh, everything is great because I'm feeling this, or everything is horrible because I'm feeling this. Everything is great because you're feeling both of those things simultaneously.
Right.
And it is such an incredible gift.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that's the space that you're in. You know, you there you are, freshly dead, and you're realizing, wow, what a blast that is. You know, so
What
I
a
wasn't
ride.
finding a way, trying to
Right.
get back into my body, or going, no, you know, I'm too young. You know, it's nothing
Right.
like that.
Right.
The best description I've ever been able to give to it is, if someone was outside and they were out in the garden working, and they were hot and sweaty, and it was really nasty, and you know, their clothes are stuck to them and they're all grimy, and they come in the back door and they peel off the dirty clothes
Mm-hmm.
and they step into the most glorious shower. The last thing you're thinking of is the dirty clothes next to the washing machine. And when one leaves the body, that's exactly the sensation. That's the best way I can describe it.
Mm-hmm.
No, I would want but no, you don't. Sorry.
Right.
And spoiler alert for people who are in deep-seated cyclical grief, where they can't seem to get out of this because they can't release that loved one. That's your grief. Because I got to tell you, it's not theirs. You are not sitting there once you've returned back to that space going, oh, but I had all this unfinished work. Oh, but I missed it. Oh,
But
I never got
some
to see my
do.
grandchild. Oh, I missed that graduation. They don't do that.
Yeah. No,
You are
but
instantly returned to a space of going, oh, that was awesome, and let's move on.
yeah, I've spoken with some people just like, no, I felt compelled to go back. I felt compelled to, I kept seeing my son's face, for example, needed to be there. And it's such an interesting thing how it's so different for so many people.
Absolutely. Now, what was so interesting for me was that I knew I was going back. So it's like, it wasn't even a choice. So you get into that moment, and people are like, oh, did somebody make you come back? And I'm like, no, nobody made me come back.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to go back, and I knew that I needed to go back. So there's never a situation, I think, where someone is forced to go back or someone is robbed. People are removed from their circumstances
Mm-hmm.
in order to get a big shake to go, hey, what are you doing? Because I have never met anybody who's had a near-death experience, whether they perceive it as positive or negative or painful
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
euphoric, where they haven't returned changed. Do you know?
I can see that. I can see that. Amelia says old souls always seem to handle the trauma better than newbies. I just, before we lose everything. And Josh says, what about if you killed yourself? Does the experience change or is it the same?
Oh, nice question, because I deal an awful lot with that. And you know, what's so interesting is, suicide is really funny, because there's more or less, if you can think of it, like there's a soul plan suicide exit, and then there is a suicide by overwhelm.
Right.
Guess where both go? The same space the rest of us do. And
Right.
so, when you've run it through that filter of organized religions, or, that this is a mortal sin or this and that, yeah, okay, whatever. When you're dancing on that playground, great, you go play with that. But what actually happens when one dies, whether, because I don't know, you eat McDonald's every single day and you're eating Big Macs and French fries, why is that not a suicide? It's just a slower form of that. Why is,
Right.
if smoking is bad for you and you smoke and you die of lung cancer, why is that not called suicide?
Is
It's
it is
because,
it mindset, do you think?
of course
Like
it
it,
is.
yes,
Of
right?
course it is. And at
Yeah.
the end of the day, none of us really have any business judging how anybody else chooses to get. Don't tell the Catholics, dude, I live in Ireland. Are you kidding? Why do you think I moved here? I'll never be out of work.
Right.
So, yeah. And funny enough, this this completely Catholic world that I live in here also got its roots in the Celtic Druids.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
Catholicism is the newbie here,
It is.
and so whilst those people might go and follow those rituals, and well, they know it, are based on ancient, they call them pagan, but, that's a
Yes.
total
Pagans,
misnomer.
accounts. Yeah.
And pagan was meant to be a slight and it was created by the Catholic Church, that name,
Mm.
meaning against God. And that's
Yeah.
not what it was like at all. So the people who worked with nature, the Druids,
Yes.
this is part of their DNA here in Ireland. So, it's really easy to bring them straight back to that. So
Yes.
don't judge a book by its cover.
Oh, the Catholics amalgamated everything and made it their own. And if
Yeah.
you really dig, a lot of Christianity in general, you see all of the old traditions that that they're all practicing in secret.
But we all, not over here. I mean, like, we just, we're going into, May Day is coming up, Beltana here, and it's huge. We'll be on top of, of Uisneach in the center of Ireland, burning the fires, and, and you'll see police there, you'll see lawyers there, you'll see doctors there, you'll see school teachers there. Like, we still do that here,
Yes, exactly.
And
I
it's
love
funny
it.
because they're not far from their actual roots. So it's not a hard sell. Let's put it that way.
No.
But getting back to that suicide question,
Yes.
what's really
Yeah.
interesting, because I work with so many people in my healing practice here who are going through that. And it really is a matter of frequency. And people who aren't comfortable with talking about death, they're like, you shouldn't say that. Really? I believe I came here to be able to do and say whatever I want to do. And if somebody wants to listen to that, they can. And if they don't,
Free will.
they don't have to.
Mm.
You sound like a suicide advocate. And I'm like, oh my gosh. All right. How about let's talk about free thinking? There is not a single one of us alive right now who could not end our lives just like that. Do you know?
Mhm.
I could stop feeding myself. I could go put a pillow over my own face. I could hang myself. I could shoot myself. I could live next door to a factory that's emitting toxic fumes. I could drive my car into a wall. I could walk into a river. I could do all sorts of different things. I could stay in a toxic relationship for long enough to where I physically became ill and then died. And then nobody would really say I committed suicide because it's under the guise of, oh, she got sick from stress.
Right.
Like, we're so full of it. It's so funny. So this
Right.
idea that we judge how people die and don't die, and then we put, such an onus around this type of death as opposed to this type of death. I mean, it's really funny when you sit down.
I think
and
it's
about
religious belief. It's instilled in you from the time you're a child, and the Catholics will tell you you don't have the right to take your own life. Only God has the right to take your life. I think what happens is people with certain mindsets, because of a belief system, if they do take their lives, there's that guilt, and that's what makes them hang back, or the pain that they felt when in the moment where they felt compelled to do the act, right? So
And then
again,
you've got
mindset.
those who do it and it was their plan all along.
Yes.
So
Yes.
you've got soul plan suicides, and I've been so blessed in this work to have so many people who were prior to a suicide who come in and go, listen, I've already done all the rehabs and the groups and the this and the that. Like, I had one not that long ago, and this individual, and they come back in and share the experience with me so that I can share with other people, because people like the truth. People don't
Yes.
like to be told a story. People don't like to be judged. And so when I sit down with someone who is actively contemplating or weighing up the suicide option, I tell them a whole bunch of different stories so that they can make a better choice.
Yes.
My job isn't to try and talk them out of something, because then I'm putting my own perception on. I'm trying to do what's going to make me feel more comfortable. Yay, they didn't kill themselves. Oh, I'm marvelous. What a great healer I am. Yeah, nothing to do with that. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's about how can I best, that's what I signed up for. How can I best assist this soul in their process? And guess what? Some of the processes involve suicide. Some of the processes involve people who have cancer because they never took control of the situations in their lives that put them under such a dire amount of stress that they became ill, you know?
Yes. Yes.
And so it's knowing that you're just showing up and you're just sharing. And so I've had this beautiful process where people will come in who knew they were going to go this way. And it's not something that was thought about lightly. It's something that they knew was coming. They'd always known. They knew that was how they were going to be going. And so they'll share that process so that I can better educate other people who maybe are stepping up to that and are doing it because they're overwhelmed. And so when you share the process with someone who has been a soul plan suicide with someone who is stuck in the overwhelm and thinks that there's no way out, generally soul plan suicides are very, very calm. They're very collected. They're not weird or manipulative about it. You know, if you do this, if you don't do this, I'm going to kill myself. Like, you never hear soul plan suicide saying that. That's not what they are.
Right.
And I had one recently where this individual had been through an extremely traumatic childhood, like really, really traumatic childhood. And from an early age, started using psychedelic drugs in order to escape that. And they did it, though, so often that they lost the capacity to kind of fully come back in and reconnect. And he knew that was part of the process. And so he goes, I want to share with you what that looks like so that you can better educate other people. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. He goes, because I respect that in this time, you're not going to sit here and try and talk me out of something. You know, I know exactly what's going on here. I'm trying to educate you. Right. And I'm like, wow. Imagine if all of our conversations went like that. And so he explained that to me, that he had done so many drugs and been into that space. And the pain had been so severe that when he would come back into the body, he would have to find another way, be it pharmaceuticals or be it alcohol or be it whatever, in order to numb that out again, that he had become so out of balance with that. And it was so interesting because in his death, there was another individual that I was working with who was always dancing with suicide. And it was an overwhelm. It was not a soul plan. It wasn't on their soul plan. This was constant and chronic overwhelm. Right. And in the explanation that he gave in his death, he ended up saving her life.
Wow.
And I'm like, what a lovely parting gift. Do you know?
Yeah,
Isn't that wonderful? And so it's like when we stop being so freaky scared of death, and realize it's like walking from one room into the next. Mm-hmm. And we can have an open dialogue about that. Mm-hmm. Which I have to say is actually a lot easier over here in Ireland, because death is quite normalized. We still go and we wake a body for 3 days, and, you're leaning on Granny's casket with a cup of tea and a biscuit while the kids are running around. And it's, right. It's quite normal. It's not, let's keep that body that's battered and worn alive at all costs so that we can eke out the last bit of insurance money. They're just not, that's not what we're like here.
Right. It's very laid back, basically.
You still drive into any small village, and the first thing you hit is the funeral home and then 2 pubs.
Right. But that's, I don't know. I do find that, when you're dealing with older cultures, I mean, the Europeans in general are very, very different than this side of the world. I find that we're very, how can I put this mildly? We're just not stuck up, but we're just, it is staunch here in a way, it's so regulated. And the traditions, I mean, let's face it, many people immigrate here. You immigrated there. It's a matter of, we just follow everything like mind you, we're getting better. We're not following the rules of religion per se anymore. A lot of people are breaking away from that. Like Amelia says, a celebration of life. People have to learn how to celebrate life and not, grieve death, I think, which is simply another level of life,
Right.
right? But here in the West, it's just we just can't seem to catch up. We're just still in that
Well, I mean,
old
it's
mindset.
fascinating because I
Yeah.
have a foot in both worlds. I have lots of feet in lots of worlds. But because I go back and forth to the States so much because I grew up there, and my
Yes.
mother is still alive. She'll be 93 in May, and
Oh my
she is
goodness.
a rock star.
Right.
Like we just did New York for Christmas, and
Right.
went to a bunch of Broadway shows and did all this carry on. And what was so fascinating was watching people's reactions to the fact that my mom, for her own personal reasons, is not vaccinated, nor am I or my children.
Right.
That's our business and nobody else's.
That's
And
right.
so off we went on this trip, and you wouldn't believe how vocal some individuals were about their, the lack of support and the danger that I was placing mom in, or that mom was placing herself in, and all. And I'm looking at her going, she's been alive since the Great Depression, y'all. I think she's well able to
She's
make up
doing
her
all
own
right.
mind, and she's outlived a lot of you,
Yeah.
And if this is not something she wants to do, but that fear of death,
Yes.
and that's not the worst outcome. My mom's biggest fear is not death.
Right.
It's that she doesn't get to everything she wants to do before she goes.
Right. Right.
And that far outweighs that. And boy, she got on that airplane and we walked all over New York City and we had a freaking ball.
Right. Right.
And so it's just a mindset. It's very, very interesting. And it's also, I think, not having that fear of death has made the pandemic experience very different for me and for people I know who operate in that space as well, because there are so many people who are motivated to do things via fear. And I think we know me well enough by now. In the last hour,
Yes,
your
absolutely.
choice is your choice. What you're
That's
doing
right.
is what you're doing. And what I'm doing is also none of your business.
Right.
I will
Right.
share my experience with you, because the way that we learn, evolve, and grow is by talking to each other and sharing our experiences,
I
not
agree.
by judging who's doing this, that, especially when
There's,
we
there's
don't have all the information.
I agree, because there's too much division that way,
So
and
much
too
division.
much division, too much fear, and not enough exploration of what we really were designed to do. Like,
Exactly.
we're so gifted, and people don't realize it is all about frequency and vibration. It is all about evolution and awareness and awakening. But I think maybe the powers that be just keep us so focused on staying on that hamster wheel, keeping us so busy with, some people have to work 2 jobs, or you come home, you work, gotta go run, do groceries, take the kids here, there. I think people just don't have the time to really sit and be who they were meant to be. They're existing, they're not living.
Right.
And Cece, you are very welcome. So,
But it's interesting too, because it's, what they do then is they create a model where they support making, say, someone like me who's able to sit here and very freely talk about this, and like I don't have to think twice about what I'm saying, because
right.
I'm speaking to you from my personal experience. I don't have to make up anything. I have had the most bizarre life you can imagine, and everything has happened. Like, I don't need to make it up or tell stories, because like it's just one story gets better than the next. It's incredible, and these are my stories. But what kind of the world at large, they like to take people who are vocal about these stories and like to share and go, oh, look at the weirdo over there. That's the one. Let's everybody come back here. Let's everybody keep going down this path here. And
Right.
oh, God love them. Do you know? Oh, yeah, she's lost it again. She's off her nut. And what we do is anyone who is not expressing that fear
Right.
and is open to living rather than living in fear of dying.
Right. Absolutely.
Because it's when someone has no fear of death, they're very, very difficult to control.
Oh, you are not wrong on that. Some people just they don't feel they feel entitled. They don't feel like there's any consequence. Self-entitled. It's
Right.
hard because I'm a very service to other person. So I basically have a lot of difficulty with a lot of service to self. And if people don't think there's a consequence, or some religions will teach you, oh yeah, you could do whatever you want, murder somebody as long as you're really truly sorry and you ask for forgiveness. It's, again, the whole mindset thing can really work for you or could work against you. Oh, you're so refreshing.
Well, thank you.
Amelia.
And what, thanks, Amelia. What I find so interesting as well, and what I think the last couple of years have shown us, and it was just amazing. Like, I had the best pandemic ever. I had a ball. And what it showed us is that we think that everybody is living in the same reality, and they're not. Like because I've done so many things dealing with beings that aren't, they're otherworldly beings and experiences of being out of the body. And, and people are like, oh yeah, well, if that was true, then why doesn't everybody see them? And I'm like,
You're not
well,
meant
it's
to.
interesting, because how come everybody doesn't view the human body the same way that I do? Before I would ever take a tablet or go under a knife, I would always have my system checked, because that's where my world is. That's where my area of expertise is. That's what my field of study has been, that I would want to keep my system functioning at 100% of whatever it's capable of now, which is not the same as what it was before this accident, by the way. But I'm 100% of who I am today, all my injuries included. Right. And so I have used chiropractic my entire life to do that. I keep myself well tuned, and, and that's part of my plan of care. Yet you'd have the next person who would get a headache, and the very first thing they would do would be take 2 Tylenol. I've never done that before. I don't, so is that I'm better than them? No, it means we're having a different experience.
Right.
So I would never berate somebody because that's the choice they make. But what's so interesting is, because that is more the mainstream choice, and because so much of the world we live in is driven by finance and pharmaceuticals,
It is.
the people who are outside of that then become the odd and the daft and the weird. And so it's just really interesting. And I think a lot of people got to see during this pandemic how different a lot of us live, and that you can't force all of us into the same thing. Like, my kids aren't vaccinated, period. And so the idea that I'm going to go stick them now because there's a virus going around, yeah, that's just not happening. However, they were old enough where I allowed them to make their own choices, because that's also not happening. I'm not going to go in and impose myself. I'm just going to go, look, I've raised you your whole lives to be educated about how your body works. Make your choice. It's okay. And I love you either way. Now, imagine if everybody had said something like that, And so you've got a lot of people now who we're living in a country here where it just disappeared overnight. And so what could have put me in jail 2 weeks ago now doesn't even exist.
Right.
And, so there are a lot of people who are going through emotional strains and challenges. And I think it's really wild, because it gave us this amazing opportunity to move from that 3-dimensional concept of how the world works. We blew right past 4D, and we're now in 5D, with that 5th dimension being the element of choice, because we've all been living the same last couple of years together, and everybody who got COVID did not die, and some people who got COVID did die, and some people didn't get COVID at all, but we were all touched by COVID. So we can discern a couple of things. If COVID were lethal, then everyone who got it would have died. Well, that didn't happen. A lot of people went in and they quit jobs that they hated. There are some people who finally asked that person that they've had their eye on for so long, and they finally said, I love you. I really want you to marry me. I know it's in the middle of a pandemic, but let's do it. And people started making these choices that were completely out of the ordinary, because they finally had the time to stop
and reflect.
And so that 8,000 emails in my inbox, I finally got to go through. Because I was out, you didn't have to show up for X, Y, or Z, it was brilliant. And so we all started experiencing the world in a completely different way. And so what could be viral and physical for one person could have been emotional in another way where, where they were separated from a loved one because they were told they couldn't go into a nursing home or they couldn't go, onto an airplane to travel, whatever. And so
Mhm.
people got to really rethink and reevaluate and reappreciate the way they handled, a lot of people went, oh my God, I can't believe I left it and now I don't ever get to see them again. And then
Mhm.
there's some people going, oh my gosh, I have so many precious memories. Thank God I did that and lived for every single day.
I think it was a time
Each
of
of us had to
reflection.
experience it.
Because so many people were off, I think it was a good time of self-reflection as well,
Mhm.
and really taking the time to enjoy life a little bit. Different circumstances, but you could still go into the outdoors. You could still connect with nature, ground your energy, just
Absolutely.
appreciate things for what they are. I mean, that's how we did. I made a point of, taking a drive down by the river every day, bringing the dogs, and it was just there were so many things I noticed because I'm an extremely busy person. And I would take that time and I would notice things I'd never noticed before. And I'm like, I've been down this road so many times. I've never noticed that there was a cave over here, for instance, just because there's always so many people around. And I think every now and then people need to take the time to self reflect. And I think if you could even do it a few minutes a day, it's amazing how much you would evolve because all of this energy that says pent up or this anger or this negativity, you put that out into this collective, and that's what everybody draws from,
Hmm.
and if they're drawing negativity or fear or all of this stuff, it's just no wonder the whole world's going crazy.
Oh,
So,
absolutely.
you
And
know,
more or less everybody kind of got the experience that they set out for.
yes, yeah,
And it's really interesting. And I, like I said, I've had an absolute ball. Um and it's been
yes,
really, really fun because I'm an educator and I'm about the body and the mind and the spirit. And oh, hello, I've been hanging out for this moment all my life. You
right.
know, the opportunity to be able to walk people through this and for them to confront their worst fears and going, oh
Mhm.
my gosh, I have to do this or I lose this job. Uh, do I really love that job that much?
Right.
No.
Self-reflection
Just that.
again.
Oh, it was just brilliant to watch people making those decisions rather than just kind of blindly walking through. Now, did a lot of people blindly walk through? Sure, they did. But that's in
Mhm.
any set of circumstances. Everybody learns and grows at a different rate. And that's
Mhm.
what makes Earth so beautiful, that we're not all exactly the same. It's also why the approach that was taken was never going to work across the board because you can't force everybody to follow the same track because
Mhm.
someone who has dedicated all their time and attention to self-care, looking after their immune system, eating well, exercising, is not going to take very kindly to having to take the exact same treatment as someone who hasn't done that. Do you know?
Mhm.
And so
Right.
to assume that everyone wants to do that is
Mhm.
a very grand assumption indeed. And
Right.
also to assume without questioning that everybody's bodies physically are going to, or emotionally are going to react the same way to the exact same medication is also folly. And so we
Mhm.
have found that out the hard way. And so people are finally beginning to wake up and see, oh gosh, hang on a second. Do you know?
Mhm.
Wow. Okay. I see what's happening here. So I think this has been the most marvelous, amazing, wonderful, exciting time. It's been
Mhm.
exhausting. Don't
Mhm.
get me wrong.
Yes.
I do go home at night now and I'm a pretty high energy person and I would just fall into bed and go, oh, I just got to shake it off because there are just so many stories attached to this on so many different levels. Um,
Right. Right.
yeah.
So,
And it's just, whew,
do
it's
you
been
feel
big.
so I guess this was your way of reconnecting after your near-death experience. So you coming forward and just, okay, I have to do something with this and I need to
Yeah.
reconnect
Well,
and
I mean, I've
heal
been
and
doing it for years,
yeah.
30 years now.
Wow.
I've been a
Yeah.
chiropractor for 25 years.
Yeah. I used to religiously go to chiropractors. I'm a big believer. So
Yeah. So it's just, and it was
yeah.
funny because it was Judge, my grandfather, who was the medical doctor, who told me that they were sending me to chiropractic school. And I'm like, hang on a second. Who aren't those the weird guys that crack your neck and all that? Like, wait, you get to be a surgeon and I'm
Yeah.
going where? And so I finally understood what actually happened, because chiropractic, the way that I learned it, I went to Sherman College of Chiropractic in Spartanburg, South Carolina, which is a very unique place, because chiropractic there is kind of practice in its original roots, without any externals. I don't care. I don't have any judgment what anybody chooses to do, this, that, or the other.
Right.
But where I went, where I was educated, philosophy, science, and art held equal ground.
Yes.
So it was just as important that I understood the principles of how the body works as opposed to how the body actually works. Do you know?
Yes.
If you've got a 3-legged stool, it's not going to stand on 2 legs.
Exactly.
And so it was really important that we studied and learned all of that. And it has served me so, because Judge was like, as these other gifts that you came back with unfold,
Right.
you need to understand a vitalistic approach to the human experience. Because what my discipline had to offer, he said, was a mechanistic approach. The human body is pieces and parts. You either medicate it or you take it out if it's not working. And what you are teaching people is that intrinsically entwined are the mind, the body, and the spirit, one unable to function without the other. And that people are going to come to you with these ills of the spirit and ills of the body, one being caused by the other. Right. And you have to hold them accountable for that. But the only way you can do that is to teach them that it exists. And so thus became my education. And that's why I studied vitalism and the philosophy, art, and science of chiropractic, because it allows, the spine, being a back doctor, that's just my vehicle. That's just my entry into that. And then, of course, I went into full-time metaphysics years ago. And so I work now with frequency, and, that's what I do in my healing.
Right.
Because one of the abilities that I came back with, everything being sound oriented, was when I moved from the space where we talked about that low drone, that kind of me, the essence of me connected to the physical form. When I moved from watching the accident unfold to being in this next space, and this is where a lot of people talk about traveling through the tunnel, but for me, it was kind of a boom, boom. And I'm now in this essence of energy, frequency, and light that we all are. This was where I actually got to do a life review. And this was where everything changed for me. And this to this moment makes the hairs stand on my arms. And it's, it's happened 30 years ago. And if you can picture being in a cinema that is surrounded by a 360-degree screen, this is where time and the concept of time just imploded for me. And I couldn't ever be the same again. Okay. I'm standing in the center of this, flanked by my 2 guides. And I am watching myself at that kitchen table talk as a 4-year-old. I am winning Living History Day in junior high school, and I'm 12. I'm being raped, and I'm 17. I'm getting my driver's license at 15 and 8 months. I've just accepted to college I'm going to go to. There I am babysitting the Thompson twins, and all of this was happening at the same time. So next to unfold in these abilities that I would come to share with people when I could read their history, their storyline, was this concept of concurrent lifetimes, because we love this idea of linear time. And, is there such a thing as past life? Sure. Past, present, future, simultaneous, all over the place, right?
Right.
So that's because we are interdimensional and multidimensional beings. And so we like things nice and tidy, though. Oh, yes, when I was a farm girl in 1783, in my past life, Yeah, okay, that's great. And I don't discount that whatsoever, because that does happen. But guess what else happens, guys, is you can be living the you that you are right now. And a lot of this is happening with my younger audience, my younger kids that are coming in, who are aware of a piece of themselves elsewhere. And some of that message is crisscrossing and interfering with their lifetime as we speak, because they are getting visions or scenes of something that's actually happening concurrently, that's not congruent with who they are in this lifetime.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Wicked. It's just amazing.
Right.
So, it's just endless. And so, you have an experience like that. and like, Zoom, you come back into your body, what, you're going to get upset because the price of gas just went up? Come on. Do you know, like it's coming back and getting horrified or hurt or upset over anything that's happening in this world is actually quite difficult. And so I force myself into situations sometimes where I get to experience that because I'm not great at that part. Ask my children. And then almost can overreact to something, like, I'm sorry, if somebody's arm is hanging out of the socket, I'm cool as a cucumber. But if they leave their underwear on the bathroom floor, and so it's teaching yourself to kind of interact, because there's just not an awful lot that really upsets me. Do you know?
Right.
It's more behaviors as opposed to circumstances. But it's not even upset because I'm being wronged by somebody or whatever. I'm exhausted by their slowness. Do you know? That's what happens sometimes.
That's funny.
Like that's, but it's the same logic. I'm sorry, you'd never get mad at a kindergartner who can't do algebra.
Right. Exactly.
But we daily get pissed off at people in our circle who aren't as evolved as we are. Do you know? I'm like, really?
Yeah, no, you're not wrong.
Works?
It's even little things, when you say something and then somebody forgets like 10 minutes later and asks you again, you're just like, it's like, already? I just said it 10 minutes ago. So it's just, I think a lack of patience. I think it just stems from people not being able to take that time to reflect. Everybody is in, like fast forward mode with tunnel vision. They don't sit long enough to calm down and open up the scope of their vision and see what's going on around them, and to find beauty in everything. Look at the glass like it's half full, not half empty. Right?
Or, hey, isn't it great you have a glass?
It's great to have a glass. Is it Amelia? Me, that's me. Yes. She has her moments like that for sure. But she's also squirrely, which I love, because it's just, you never know what's going to totally come out of that little face. So I know it's awesome. Yeah. The glass is refillable. There you go. That's a good way to look at it.
Well, it's funny. You know what? When we're talking about glass, one of the things that I am dealing with most in my sessions at the moment is we are a very super saturated people right now. So we've just come off the heels of a big event, and then we walk straight into a war, and so like people are full. And so what that means vibrationally, let me give you for instance, everything has a frequency.
Yes.
Okay. And so part of my gift is I can pitch or hear, let's say, this brain tumor sounds like this, or this mental or emotional state sounds like this. And I can then recreate a frequency that assists that person in restructuring or rebuilding or regrowing new neural pathways that will take them out of past trauma, right? Because let's face it, here's us in present time, and that's all that exists. All right. So when we were talking about concurrent lifetime, that's also present time.
Right.
So for us to go back into the past and access a trauma, or for us to jump ahead into the future and access fear, that has to happen via a neural pathway and a chemical reaction. That's all, because the events themselves aren't actually taking place, because everything is now, right?
Right.
So what's happened is a lot of people, after everything that they've just been through, are really, really full. So let's use 396 hertz, for instance. 396 hertz, that's fear, guilt, shame, grief, anger, self-loathing. I mean, who can't put their hand up to one of them right now? Do you know?
Right.
And so what's happening in this supersaturation is that you could have somebody who has just lost a precious grandmother, and they are actually grief-stricken. And when you call them up to say, hey, would you like to go for a cup of tea? How could you talk to me like that?
Right.
And this anger erupts from them.
Right.
Or someone is driving down the road and someone blows through a red light, nearly clips them, but they don't. Now the appropriate response is fear. They nearly just got hit. And next thing, they're on the side of the road and they're sobbing, grieving the dead grandmother.
Right.
And what's happening is that because each frequency in the human chakral system has multi layers to it. These are getting crisscrossed now because people are so full, because they don't take that time for self-reflection or wringing out the sponge or emptying out the picture or whatever metaphor you want to use. They go to bed dirty. And so what's happening is you get this crisscross of emotions where we are not seeing the appropriate reactions. Look at our kids. How many of you out there listening to this can name by name a child in your life who was riddled with anxiety? We've never seen anything like it. I certainly haven't.
No.
No. Oh my gosh. I have it brought
we're
in
riddled
every
with
single
it.
day, and I'm talking high anxiety, serious anxiety. And it's because they have no idea how to clear themselves. And those, they've been in a state of chronic fear for so long that now they're lashing out, and the fears become anger. Oh, well, that's ADHD. Oh yeah, that's high functioning autism. Let's throw a name at it. Let's throw,
Of course.
because they're lashing out and they're expressing any number of those emotions that vibrate at that speed, because literally they can't single in to focus on the one that's appropriate in the moment. This is super saturation. And so this is why it's so important that we take the time to teach our children and teach ourselves how to clear ourselves out, wring out that sponge. Like you'd never wipe off the kitchen counter with a super saturated sponge, because you just make a big fat mess. You got to wring the water out, and then you go wipe up and clean up the mess. But we're not even doing that with ourselves. We'll wash our hair, we'll take a shower, but when was the last time you cleared off that old energy field? Because you know what? There's a lot of doo-doo out there. And every time you walk out your door, you're stepping in spiritual, energetic doo-doo. And then coming home and then getting into your bed, interacting with your kids, interacting with your colleagues, and wondering why things aren't going so great.
Right. No, makes complete sense. It makes complete sense. It's self-care on a different level. Yeah.
Exactly. It's that tripod. It's that interaction of mind, body, and spirit, and taking responsibility for the fact that you are responsible for taking care of that. And then what happens is we've gotten into a world that's so shook, and you've got people who are so ready to leap into the positions of power that people are handing over their own power because they're so super saturated, they're so full, and they're so afraid. And so they can't even make those decisions for themselves any longer. They're just like, here, you do it for me. And then boom. That's the world we're living in right now. Do you know? And then it becomes my health, my well-being is somebody else's responsibility. And that's the message that we're sending to our children today. So it's no wonder they are riddled with anxiety.
Do you think that we just give it up too easily?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because guess what? It's hard work. And we have been conditioned for decades now to avoid hard work at all costs, to find the easiest way to success without getting our hands dirty.
Oh, yeah, it's going on all around us.
And we got a lot of keyboard warriors out there who love to throw some good punches and put up some great memes and criticize the people who are actually out there in the trenches.
Yes. Yes, it's all around us.
It's all around us. And so we smile and we open our arms and we welcome them in and we curse behind our breath. Do you know? But that's life.
Throw up another meme.
So interesting.
Yeah, let's throw another meme at you. I think we live in the world of technology. Also, it doesn't help when everything is done via messenger or text, because there's no feeling. There's no emotion behind it. So it's easy to look at the words. You could say one word that can mean two different things, two different tones, and things get so misconstrued that there's a whole other melee of crazy. Technology. Over meme. Yes. You can over meme. It is over meme for sure, Amelia. I think that's how people cope. It's just like they don't even use their own words anymore. They go in, they find a picture with memes and go, there we go. And you post
and then
it.
We have a lot of people who've become very passionate about causes.
Yes.
Who've never even actually been out in the real working world yet. They're educated.
Yes.
But because of the circumstances that have occurred over the last couple of years, and when they've come out of college or education or work scenario to move into something else, they lack the interaction of actually having experience of one-on-one conversations with a real human being.
Right.
You know, and there's a lot to be said for that, because, you know, yeah, there's some people who were so happy. All their Christmases had come at once. This was an introvert's heaven this last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that they didn't have to actually put clothes on and show up in work, and they could sit at home and be genius and do their work from their kitchen table. They were digging it. You know, it was amazing. Yeah. And I'm delighted for them. But then there were a whole nother group of people who couldn't remember, don't stand up because you're not wearing pants, because they'd never done a Zoom call before, you know? Yes. And so it puts a whole, and I would be in that category, you know, it puts a whole nother spin. I'm a people person. I would be starved without that physical touch, you know?
Yes.
And so it's really interesting. Again, we try to put everybody into the same place and go, well, everybody will be able to work from home. No, they won't. I can't do a virtual chiropractic adjustment.
This is true.
You know, nor do I want to, you know, right. And hey, I don't want to have my massage therapist talk soothingly to me over FaceTime. I want to rub. And there are lots of things that involve physical interaction that you just can't take away, and, you know, make everybody fit into to that same space. And it's our responsibility to preserve that.
Right. Right. I agree with you. I think, you know, you did something really positive after your experience. And, you know, some people can never recover from a near-death experience. Other people go on to do these amazing things. I mean, we've had a lot of people come on the show with, you know, they've taken different turns, especially if they didn't have a very good experience. Then it's just like, oh my gosh, you know, I need to turn things around. I need to pay it forward. I need to leave my mark somehow, you know.
But isn't that beautiful that they're able to come back and tell that story? And that's the one thing that all of us have in common, is that we only got so far.
Yes, exactly.
And so each and every one of us comes back. Like, I have a guy, you know, I do the NDE circuit all over the world. And one of my really good friends, a guy called Peter Bedard, you would enjoy him. And he had a very similar near-death experience to mine, except he did not want to come back. He felt forced back.
Wow.
And he spent a very, very long time in a deep depression over that. And so, you know, he's an amazing therapist now, and you know, has written a book, and you know, he's just an incredible guy. Peter Bedard is his name.
Right.
And we are such a comedy duo when we speak, because, like, I'm like, yeah, cheerleader type, and he's like the really pissed off my gay twin, you know?
Right.
And he's just like, I did not want to come back here. But the beauty of his work is because of that. He wrote this protocol that literally takes someone from the depths of despair, and, you know, it's called convergence healing. And he created this step-by-step protocol to help walk someone through. He was a dancer. He was he's the most beautiful body, amazing dancer. And he was on his bike and got smashed into the back of a lorry, you know? And so he didn't dance again. So you know, he comes back into a body that was broken, no different than myself. And I just make fun of all my injuries, and, you know, but he lost an entire career over that. And so that was
that would be hard. Your life completely changes against your will. But
then the beauty of that is that in the depths of his despair, he created something that has taken thousands of people out of their own despair.
Right.
So each one of us has our experience for a particular reason. You know, and it comes in every shape and form. And, you know, I don't think anyone's ever not had a life-changing NDE. They might have one that they were perceived as super amazing or really, really horribly uncomfortable. But I don't think any of us come back not changed.
Absolutely. I can't see how you couldn't come back unchanged. It's like you just step over, you know, whether it's dimensionally speaking, whether it's, you know, you go up, you know, wherever you end up, the void, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
You know, you can't step in there and then step back and leave the experience behind you. No, absolutely not.
And, you know, for me, one of the things is, you know, like, you already are that which you seek.
Right.
You want to talk about the certainty of something? I came back with that certainty.
Right.
We spend all this time trying to seek our higher. I'm like, guys, get dirty, live, Try to be nice, but if it's also not on your path, guess what? Somebody's got to be the bully. There are some parents that are the nicest people I've met, and their kids are the nastiest pieces of work you've ever seen. Someone's got to be that,
Yes.
And so
Yes.
for us to place judgment on the idea that somebody is not living the way we are, hello, step forward and front and center and let me see your perfect life. There aren't any of us, or we wouldn't be here. When they talk about the flaw of human beings, we're perfectly flawed.
Big
What
time.
we came here to be and do. These bodies are so weird. Some of them die at the drop of a hat. And then you got someone like me. I've had cancer twice and a brain tumor. I've broken my neck, and I'm sitting here talking to you. Like, why?
Right.
And why did that person get a bad flu and they drop dead? Like we're all here. If I know one thing for certain, we are here. And this is a thing that got me through the pandemic, and, with my hands all over people all day long, 24/7 and unvaccinated, it was, I am here until I am finished here.
Right.
There is no war. There is no disease. There is no crime. There's no nothing that is going to change that as fact in my life.
Right.
And if that is tomorrow, I will look back and I will have lived well. I can tell you that. I've done it all. But I don't have any intention of going anywhere right now, because there are so many things that I still have left to do that I'm very aware of. So we come here and we stay here until we're done here. End of story. And that is something that is available to all of us. Now, there are some people right now, especially because they're feeling very down and they're going, well, I don't want to be here anymore. They come into me all the time and I'm like, all right, let's talk about it. What's your strategy? Give it to me. And they're like,
I will have you hold that thought, because I have to do a station and sponsor ID.
Oh, go.
Okay, thank you. So tonight, of course, because this is a pre-record, we are the Outer Realm. We are with our very special guest, Dr. Mary Helen Hensley, who is absolutely delightful. And wow, what an interview. What a story. I love it. We are fully sponsored, of course, by the amazing people over at Folgers Coffee, who have been with us since day one. And we're so grateful for them. And we know we're going to have a long road ahead with you. So thank you. Big thank you to our other sponsor, Dr. Snick, aka Justin Snicker, award-winning composer of Halloween horror, sci-fi, and dark wave electronic music, who is responsible for our intro and outro. I see we do have quite a few people in chat, considering it was not an advertised pre-record. And we do run it live just on one stream for the network. It simplifies things for later on, and it will be airing later tonight at our usual time. And Amelia and I will both be in chat just to answer questions, and we always have a good time. But while you're there on UFO Paranormal, please get in there, subscribe, and see all the other stuff that you don't get to see on the channel unless you are a member. So if you're just tuning in, sit tight, because we have another little while to go. So we are back. Now we can continue. So, and Amelia goes, I was early with Folgers. Yes, you were, Amelia. Not the same without you.
Gosh, that's one of those things. The second you say the word, I can smell it.
Right. Right. Yeah. We love it. We love Folgers. Seriously, we're grateful to have them. They're just awesome sponsors.
That's wonderful.
So, let's continue on with what you were saying, with people who come to you because they don't want to be here. They're having some kind, I would imagine you have to be going through some kind of trauma to just say, you know what, I'm done. I don't want to be having this experience anymore.
Well, it's, some people may have lost the love of their life. I have someone I'm working with right now who's in stage 4 cancer. And here's the interesting thing is his house burned down and he wasn't in it. Here he was trying to find all sorts of ways out, and he missed the fire.
You missed the boat.
And I was like, wow, that was bad timing. And, that we can talk and laugh about that and not like whisper and tiptoe around it. Look, if somebody is feeling suicidal, the best thing you can do for them is have an open conversation where they don't feel like they've lost their mind or they're some kind of weirdo. Show up and just be there. And don't place your outcome on what you wish. Some of you may have children out there who go through this. There are a lot of them. And you know what? Of course, the last thing in the world that you want is to lose your child to this. But you've got to be centered and grounded enough to know that you were given that life in order to care for that life, to create a space for that life to evolve and grow, in order to be able to competently make a decision like this.
Right.
And the outcome in that decision isn't yours.
Right.
All you can do is show up with love, and that's it.
Well, because it's
And
about
so
them, right? It's not so much
it's
about us or about you.
yeah, and oh my gosh, human beings, we are something else for trying to hijack other people's deaths.
Right.
It's like, you can almost point out in a circle of friends who's going to be the chief wailer at this funeral, and they might not have been, really an active part of that person's life, but boy, they're going to show up when the drama's on.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so funny how we could sit and a dying family member would be there, and we're holding vigil by their side, and they're too weak to tell us to get out,
Right.
because they don't necessarily want them by their side. And then that person who's been there 24/7 goes off to get a cup of coffee, and the individual takes the chance to get on out. Right.
And you hear about it all the
All
time.
the
I've
time.
known people who have done it. Amelia says, I'm a huge supporter of assisted suicide for the terminally ill. That's actually a really sensitive one. I would know what your thoughts are on it because it's their choice. A lot of people really have difficulty with that one, assisted suicide.
Well, really, it's not them having to make that choice, is it?
Yeah. Apparently, though, when it comes to the legalities, it pretty much
again,
is.
Isn't that funny that we would have put legalities around something like that?
Yes,
As
yes.
if it's our business.
Yeah.
It's really interesting what we pick and choose to
Mhm.
involve ourselves in. And and again, it's just that's that fun part about being human, and that's what we come down here to work our way through, and
Yeah.
fight for the cause and to do whatever. But that's why I find life here so fascinating.
Right. Well, they're
Yeah.
they're definitely fascinating. I mean, what are your thoughts then on afterlife? I'm extremely curious about your book, how promised by heaven. So, how do you deem heaven? How do you deem, it's an
Okay. Well, first of
unusual
all, that
name.
book was called Promised. And then when Simon and Schuster took my first 3 books, they decided, but it was back in the day when Eben Alexander's book, Proof of Heaven, had just come out, and it did really well. And
Right.
so Simon and Schuster decided to tack on Promised by Heaven on the title
Right.
of mine. That wasn't the original title. It was called Promise. Isn't that funny? But then
Oh,
you make a book deal, and there it goes. And,
and it's
it was
gone.
really interesting
Right.
how that happens. Promised, I was, because my father, when those celestial beings visited him,
Yes.
he asked, do you promise that what you have said to me about this baby is true? And so whenever I was in distress, or I got in trouble, or let's say he had to reprimand me, and then afterwards, he would always say, you're promised. And
Wow.
that's where
Wow.
that came from. So Promised by
Wow.
Heaven was all about the accident. And then it's kind of my life leading up to that. My favorite book is actually Understanding is the New Healing. And the reason is because it's about everybody else's stories. Like,
Right.
enough about my story. Okay. We see it's that mine sounds so spectacular because I got to die, and I've come back, and all this. I love nothing more than the subtle nuances of a story that doesn't see the obvious, you've got to find the miracle within the story that's not right in your face.
Right.
And those of us who go through the NDE, make no mistake, it's not because we're so enlightened or blessed. It was because we were missing something. As we
Right.
say over here in Ireland, a little thick. We were a little thick in the head about something, and
Yeah.
had to be set aside and shown with very slow, very pointed conversation as to this is how it works.
Right.
So I love the people's stories who have these amazing, miraculous events that are happening every single day. And so
Mhm.
Understanding is the New Healing is about that. And I tried to take this smattering of every possible thing I could confront, from, aliens to cancer to life after death, to everything that you could think of that would touch a human experience,
Mhm.
and tell these people's stories. And
Right.
it's also a favorite of mine because it was the first book in Audible history to
Mhm.
be backed by these healing frequencies. So when someone is listening to this audio book, they're not just having an audible experience, they're having an immersive experience,
Right.
because they could be resonating with a storyline. You know, I could be talking about an 80-year-old grandmother from the North who was devastated at having to abort her 6th child in order to stay around so that her husband wouldn't kill her, because if she ever fell pregnant again, he would slit her throat. So she had to sneak off and abort a child in order to remain for her other 5 children.
That's so sad.
Right?
Wow.
Oh, but it's so true. Actually,
Right.
it wasn't slit her throat. He was going to kick her stomach in and murder her that way.
Oh,
Small change.
right. Right.
So it's fascinating where somebody could be listening to that story and they might not have gone through the same experience, but they might have had to have chosen abortion at some stage in their life. So now all of a sudden the frequencies that help heal the fear, the guilt, the shame, the grief, that anger behind it are playing as they're listening to this story. And they are now resonating with that frequency and they're healing as they listen.
Right.
So I love that book.
Yeah.
And you know, any audios I do forward are backed by these frequencies. So I just love the idea of taking it into a fully immersive experience for an individual where they actually, because literally, you know, if I have 2 guitars in a room and I pluck the E string on one guitar, the E string on the other guitar is going to vibrate. It takes that for someone to heal if they're ready. So you never know who's listening to that book, who could be so queued up, who's done so much work, and that last little tweak sends them over and life changes for them.
Right.
How
It could be anything, really, couldn't it? Just that one little trigger word or sound.
Exactly.
Yes. Do you think with frequency, do you think a lot of our issues is because we are just disconnected from the planet's frequency? We're all supposed to be, we should be connected to the planet. We're all on this ride, and the Schumann resonance. I mean, there's so much information on it out there. People look it up. And I think that to ground themselves, which would probably help them from being so scattered, if we could just reconnect to nature, reconnect to the planet and her energy.
But also remember, everybody isn't supposed to be connected the same way, because in order for different scenarios to play out, in order for, you might not like this storyline, it looks awfully uncomfortable, and ooh, I wouldn't want that one, but that's theirs.
Right.
And so the idea of, again, it's kind of like when we were talking about the boxes and being disconnected. Can you actually be disconnected from the Schumann resonance? No, you're living in it, you know? But can you be disconnected from the awareness of the significance of it? Absolutely.
There we go.
You're always connected. Forget about that. It's like somebody was asking me in earnest the other day about he was like, oh my God, just tell me, is it flat Earth or round Earth? And I'm like,
I want to know too.
It's both.
Wow.
Because you're looking at a sine wave. You're looking at a fluid, holographic, mobile, effervescent, and organic sine wave. So it's all sorts of different shapes.
It's whatever you make it.
But it'll stop and pose for a photograph, you know? So it's so funny, these ideas that we place, and we make things that are, actually quite simple physics, equations and biomechanics and all sorts of ways to interact with this world, and we make them so complicated, and they're actually not really. And then the answers to all of it, that's what's so funny, is right under our nose.
Yes.
It's just like,
so you just have to be aware. Is it just taking a moment to listen?
Taking a moment to listen. It's like, people are like, okay, that's great. I see how excited you are. And there's life after death. Well, my mom just died and I can't hear her. And they get this kind of anger, towards, and I'm going, and they were like, well, yeah, good for you. Well, for some, they say here in Ireland, well, for some, that's great. You can see dead people and you can know this, but I can't. And I'm like, yeah, you can. I do it every single day and I'm really good at it.
Right.
But guess how I got really good at it? By doing it every single day.
Right.
Because I make time to do it every single day. I also shower every day, and I brush my teeth every day. It's a discipline. Do you know?
Right.
I am a horrible cook. Guess why? I hate it. I don't like being in the kitchen, and I have OCD. And so I clean as I go, and it makes it a miserable experience for me. My
Right.
best friend Trisha, she can make the biggest mess, and there's flour on the ceiling and all, and this beautiful meal comes out, and she has embraced the joy of the process of doing that. I don't like that because I have a damaged vagus nerve. So
Right.
food is something that I have to do because I know that if I don't,
Hmm.
that I can't live.
Right.
I have a damaged switch because when I start eating, I don't really remember that it's time to stop until I become, I'm in pain.
Right.
Or I could go a day and a half and go, oh shit, I forgot to eat.
I do it all the
So,
time.
and that's,
It's like,
that's my
oh,
vagus
I
nerve.
think I just
So I
went
don't
through.
find food preparation, food,
Yes.
anything, like I don't get a lot of joy out of that,
Right.
And
Right.
so it's what has your attention.
Hmm.
And it's really interesting because if you can think of us all, we all come into this world like with a big patchwork quilt.
Right.
And it's so funny because like right now, everybody's talking about the war in the Ukraine. And last week it was about the pandemic and this and that. And, there's been viruses and wars and people dying for as long as we've been here. But now, if you're standing on this patch of the quilt that's all about that, you want everybody else out there to be on that patch with you because it's now in your consciousness and
Right.
awareness.
Right.
And aren't we so funny like that? And then we
Yeah.
judge. How could you be so uninvolved in this cause? How could you not care in this? And I'm like, well, because I've been on the patchwork quilt that recognizes that these things are happening every single day.
Right.
And I don't jump every time there's a new political whatever, or, and because that's not an area of interest for me.
Right.
Do you
Right.
know? I get how that works. And I also understand how, what a folly it is to fall down that rabbit hole and get stuck in there. But
Right.
every discipline in the world has that same rabbit hole. Do you know? You
Mhm.
can do that. You can do that with spirituality.
Right.
People
Absolutely.
can fall down that rabbit hole and get all crazy,
Oh, they do. So,
And they do. Oh my God, they're adorable.
Amelia is asking what your thoughts are on ET,
On
extraterrestrials.
ETs, extraterrestrial, yes and yes. So the big ha-ha will be, the way it's playing up next. Like now over Ireland and on regular news, now we're starting to see sightings. And there's things, there's been the odd one here and there. There have been those of us who've been talking about it forever.
Right.
And then we see these sightings and on. So they're drip feeding. Always watch Hollywood, guys.
Yep.
They're drip feeding, and this is nothing new. Nobody's coming that hasn't already been here. So let me just tell you that now. So this idea that we're waiting, oh yeah, that'll be it. Next thing it'll be extraterrestrials. No, next thing you're going to become aware that there already were extraterrestrials here.
That's right.
Okay. I've
Right.
seen them. I've met them. I've worked with them. I have worked with some pretty interesting combinations out there of people who would fall under military or government and who are working with these individuals, and they're very real, and some of them look just like me and you. How interesting.
Mhm.
And it's quite amazing that we would actually believe that look at how different we all look. Do you know?
To think
And
that we're the
that we
only
all come
ones on
from.
the big beach,
It's just
No.
so funny,
Yes.
So
Right.
yes, I love ET and I love ETs, and there are, thanks be to the gods, there are so many individuals out there and so many different types of teams that are here assisting us. And that's why, my daughter was asking me the other night and she was like, oh my gosh, Mom, there's all this talk about World War III. I said, relax. This place stays. Do you understand? Earth is an experience. It is not something that can be destroyed by those who are experiencing it. Let me
Right.
repeat that. Earth is an experience, and it is not something that can be destroyed by those who are experiencing it. They can destroy their own experiences. They can dirty up or muck up their own experiences, but they don't get to end the ride.
Right.
This place has been around for a very, very, very long time. But here is something that we as human beings love to do now. We've got to change everything about the world and do this. And it's like rocking up to Harvard Law and pounding on the gates and going, hey, I want to learn how to cook a souffle. Well, there's a great cooking school down the road over there, and they teach how to make a beautiful souffle. No, I want to go to Harvard. I want to go to this school. Well, I'm sorry, we don't teach cooking here. It is my right to learn how to cook at this school. I'm sorry, we don't teach cooking at this school. And they keep going and going. And they're like, everybody should be able to have the right to cook. Everybody should know how to cook, and everybody should have the right to attend the school. And I'm going, no, that's not exactly how it works. We come to Earth for a particular type of experience, one being that dichotomy, that we get that beautiful experience of simultaneous grief and joy. Do you know, that's what the Earth experience is all about. And like we said in the beginning, it's very unique to here. It's amazing, right? But what happens is a lot of people, you know, listen to every Miss America pageant, you know, and what would you like? I'd like world peace. Guess what? Never happening here, because that's not what this dynamic is all about.
Right.
Because there are so many beautifully honed and perfectly crafted experiences for souls who signed up and paid the big bucks to come into this world in order to have X, Y, and Z experience. And guess what? There are lots of teams, human being and humanoid, who are here to facilitate people's ability to have those experiences. Some of them being very, very pleasant, and some of them being very, very horrible.
Yeah, but I mean, some of us are caught right in the middle of all the crap. You know, like we've got a renegade out there trying to start World War III. I think this get some damage. The ripple effect is going to be massive,
Of course
and
it
a
is.
lot of us are feeling this, right?
Of course it is.
That's not what I signed up for. I don't want to feel a ripple effect of some kook.
Well, let me
you
tell
know.
you how I know that's not true, because you're here.
Well,
You don't get to
yes.
say I didn't sign up for it just because it's
Damn.
uncomfortable, and say, and when you're getting everything perfect and lovey dovey and everything's fabulous, and you get to say, yes, this is what I came here for. You came here for all of it, baby, or you wouldn't be here.
So other people just, you know, I might just feel like I want to be here because of this time period. This is.
I wouldn't miss this for the world. Are you kidding? This is incredible. Watching people, you know, literally crumble to their core and trying to find a way through this to make sense out of nonsense. Oh, it's incredible.
Amelia, how can people heal themselves right now who are suffering from vibrational effects before we get to the end of the show?
So I have a website. It's called MaryHelenHensley.com.
Right.
Okay. And on MaryHelenHensley.com, the first thing that's going to pop up is a COVID frequency. Now, within this COVID frequency, and this is free, by the way, you just go click on, right? And when I said to you before, I'm able to pitch different frequencies of all sorts of physical and emotional states. Well, I was also able to pitch the frequency of the COVID experience, the physical, the chemical, the emotional, the spiritual. So in that frequency, it's like a 7-layer cake. There's a lot going on there. It lasts for 33 minutes. You can listen to it every day, and it is life-changing. Okay. Now
I'll make sure that gets posted on the website or on the
and
Facebook
that's right
page.
there, first thing that you'll come to.
Okay.
Under downloads on my website, there's something called Larimar Dreams, and if you download that album, there's also a listener's guide that tells what each one of the frequencies does. It gives a little whole history behind it, and how to use this in your everyday life. I use frequency the way other people use like a medicine kit. Right. You know, if one of my kids comes to me and they've got something going on, it's like, I'm like, pop on 396 or put it on 417, or, you know, I just finished assisting somebody in writing a book, and her mom helped us. Her mom's been dead for 4 years. And we went into 963 hertz, because that's the last frequency when you're still connected to the plane. And it's also a frequency that those who are out of a physical body can lower to and access and interact with us. Surprise! So that's on there as well. And we wrote a book, and her mom contributed to the book that way. I could talk to her mom, but she couldn't the same way that I could. But there's a frequency that allowed her to do it. And so that means there's one for you too. Right. And so there is a frequency for all of us, you know, for everything. And so if you look at Larimar Dreams, it tells what each one of those things are for. And that's going from DNA repair to, again, accessing those who are no longer in a body, to releasing, you know, the fear and the guilt and the shame. And a big one, 417 hertz is a really special one as well, because it's taking something. We've all had trauma. Every
Yes.
single one of us who's in a
Yes.
body has had trauma. But what we want is to be able to put that into the book of life, into the story of who we are, where we can take at will that book down and read that story and maybe share that wisdom with somebody else without being hijacked and robbed of any present time energy from something
Right.
that occurred in the past.
Right.
And so
Right.
417 hertz is a beautiful frequency for letting go, for keeping the wisdom of something that was very painful, but not having to constantly relive the pain.
Right.
How cool is that?
That's very cool.
Like, that's what I want in my toolbox, you know?
Right. Right. No, absolutely. I'll make sure that gets posted too before the live show this
Oh,
evening.
that'll be
And
great. And people will see too. They're like, oh gosh, how can I get a healing session? Guys, one of the beauties of the internet is that we're so accessible to everything. And one of the downfalls is that we're so accessible to everything. So
true.
I am many hundreds of thousands of healing sessions behind the request. So send me a message and say hello. But as far as like, if you put your name down for a healing session, it'll be a little while before I can get to you, because let's say, I got 3,500 emails last week.
Right.
That was last week.
Right.
So,
Right.
while I love the internet and I love doing podcasts and all that, every time a million people hear that, 500,000 emails come in. And so it's very difficult as one person. So what I'm doing to remedy that is I'm actually creating a little YouTube show where I'm going through different premises and I'm teaching
Right.
on each show. And we always have a good time.
We'll check that out for sure.
Yeah,
So
I'll give you the info on it when it's all ready to rock and roll.
please, yeah, make
But
sure I
I
get the
can't
link.
thank you enough for having me here.
Oh,
It is people like you who make this. And Amelia,
pleasure.
thank you.
It's our pleasure.
Where would I share my story only but for you? Do you know?
Oh,
So
no,
I thank you
absolutely.
very much for that.
I can assure you there will be a lot of people listening to this show tonight. We're so fortunate. Our listenerships, always, it's all international, always between 2-3 million people a segment. It's just, we're really, really privileged for that and very humbled by it at the same time. This is a part of the show where you tell everybody how to find you. You've got the website, you're going to have YouTube.
That's it. You know what? Go on that
books.
website. But if you go into podcast land, I'm on every podcast out there, I think.
Okay.
And it's so funny because people are like, why don't you have your own podcast? Because I like this part.
Right.
I like, it's the same as like with the cooking thing. I don't like to cook. I like going to someone's house to eat.
Right.
And so I love being the guest on the podcast. It's so much fun to be able to just relax and kick back and tell the stories. And so I'm on a lot of podcasts out there. So if you want to see anything like that, really, for accessing me, maryhelenhensley.com.
Right.
All of my books are there, and it directs you to, where you can get those. And, we try to keep everything kind of current with what's going on. And now we've got to get better at putting up speaking engagements, because live speaking engagements are back on again.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So, the next place I'll be is at the ARE, the Edgar Casey Association for Research and Enlightenment, in May. I think on the 12th of May I'm there. So it's just, we're kind of getting back into that groove again. But really, what's the best thing you can do for yourself? Start using those frequencies, because it is something you can do in your everyday life that is so freaking simple, and it takes so little time.
Right.
And it's also the vast majority, unless you're using the ones that are, have a deep theta wave that are putting you into a meditative state as you go in to heal your DNA or access your departed loved ones, the vast majority of them are going to be enhanced by a gamma or an alpha or beta wave that you can do while you're doing the dishes or driving the car or whatever.
Just keep it on in the background while you're just doing everyday stuff.
And if you're interested in that, in the frequencies, I would definitely recommend go check out on Amazon. The Understanding is the New Healing, because it is a very unique experience to be able to be immersed into that frequency while you're actually being told the story.
Right.
And I love telling a story.
You do, and you are awesome at it.
So yeah,
awesome.
That's kind of me in a nutshell. I'm on Facebook, Dr. Mary Helen Hensley, author.
Mm-hmm.
You can follow my page. I think my personal page is kind of maxed out at this stage, but Dr. Mary Helen Hensley, and I'm on there and it's Mary Helen Hensley on Instagram as well. So I'm, I'm on all the usual suspects, but yeah. So really, the website to order anything or to see anything or to do, guys, go check out that COVID frequency though, because it is a game changer and it's 100% free, all for you.
Thank you. So thank you for joining us. I will email you probably later this evening after the live show, and we'll give you the live listenership. So you'll know exactly how many people you reached.
I'm so glad that it worked out in the end, and I'm just
did.
very, very grateful to you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll be in touch. Thank you for joining.
Take care.
All right,
Bye.
darling. Bye-bye. Wow. What a breath of fresh air she is. My gosh, what an energetic interview. But of course, we've come to the end of another incredible segment. I think you guys are going to love this tonight. And I'm really excited for all of you who are going to get some of this energy from this amazing woman. So thanks to Mary Helen Hensley for being on the show today. She's just amazing individual doing some really great work. Big thank you to Folgers again for sponsoring the show. We love you so much. We're so appreciative of you. Thank you, Dr. Snick, aka Justin Snicker, for your voice and your music. And do not forget to go to the UFO Paranormal YouTube channel and subscribe. And don't forget to become a member. Guys, really, there's going to be some great content coming on. The Outer Realm, of course, we'll have some maybe older segments coming up there. Amelia and I have a few things, that we're looking at doing also just for members. So go check it out. If you'd like to contact us, only contact us, please, at theouterrealmcontact@gmail.com. Theouterrealmcontact@gmail.com. Next week is going to be another amazing week. Wednesday evening brings Charles Christian, again, all the way from the UK. It will be a pre-record, but he's going to be sharing with us all his weird tales of the United Kingdom. And there's lots of them, so it can go in any direction. It's going to be an amazing segment. Thursday evening, we also welcome Dr. Scott Taylor, who is an experiencer of, get this, a shared near-death experience, and apparently one of the only people on the planet who has experienced it, and he teaches all about it. So it's going to be phenomenal. You're not going to want to miss it. So until then, of course, Amelia and I bid you all a good night. And we thank you for tuning in. We will see you in chat. Night, night.
You have been listening to The Outer Realm with Michelle DeRoche and Amelia Pisano, airing live every Wednesday and Thursday evening, 9 to 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 to 10 p.m. Central, on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans.